9 different parks, starting at Glacier up in the top. So you won't hurt my feelings if you want to beg out after a while to go see the Patriots at 8:30 or something, but I'm going to just chug right along. Some of the parks you can come to and maybe spend an afternoon and say that you've seen the parks. Some of the ones that we're going to start with don't fall in that category. Glacier is one of the bigger ones. It's up on the Canadian border of Montana. Actually, it flows over the border and was one of the first ones back in 1932. It was the world's first international peace park. So you've got a pretty big conserved area. The Waterton Lakes National Park is the Canadian counterpart, or at the part that flows over into Canada is known as the Canadian Waterton Lakes National Park. They have an abutment of a recreation area joining it. The Glacier National Park is covered on the west and southern border by a national forest, as well as the Blackfoot Indian reservation to the east. So nobody's going to be building any condos anywhere in the area anytime soon. There's a lot of preserved area. But that being the case, this is not a highly traveled area. The Continental Divide goes north to south through Glacier, and there's only one road that goes from east to west through the park. It's a very special road. We'll get to that in a minute, but you'll see when we show the scenery why this area is not very conducive to building roads and driving. The symbol, each of the parks has a symbol. The symbol of Glacier Park is our mountain goat. There's quite a population of them in the park. There are no firearms allowed in any national parks. And after a few generations, the critters that hang out there get used to not, I won't say they're human friendly, but they get used to not having to run away. They're not going to get shot between the eyes. So they're usually more interested in seeing what you brought for lunch, and maybe you might want to share with them. So you'll have some wildlife encounters if you get up into the back country. To give you an idea of what's going on in Glacier, the small patch at the bottom at the base of Mount Merritt there is that's at 5,500 feet. So just to give you a scale, a magnitude, Mount Merritt at the top on the right is over 10,000 feet. So you're looking at a 4,500 foot vertical face. That's the kind of scenery, that's the kind of mountain peaks that you get in Glacier. At the top of Mount Merritt is Old Sun Glacier. It's one of 25 glaciers that are in Glacier National Park. And you might say, oh, wow, that's a bunch, 25. It's really not very many. 170 years in geological time is not a very large slug. 170 years ago, there were 150 glaciers, active glaciers, within the borders of the park. We're down to 25, and if you want to go to Glacier and say that you've seen a glacier in Glacier National Park, you got about 4 or 5 more summers before they're gone. They're retreating. Well, here's an idea. On the left, that was 100 years ago, and look at what we're down to. There's a little patch there, is all that's left of this multi-100 foot deep glacier. They are retreating in Glacier National Park. That's not to say that, oh, the sky is falling, climate change, global warming, sound the alarm, because only 300 miles due west of here, along the Canadian-US border, brings you to Washington State and North Cascades National Park. North Cascades National Park has over 300 glaciers, and they're not retreating. They get more snow or enough snow in the winter to offset what melts during the summer, and they're holding their own. So there are parts of the globe that in fact glaciers are retreating, but it's not universal. It's not everywhere. It depends on the weather patterns in your particular area. Glacier, as I say, there are not a lot of roads in it, so the main way of seeing the park is hiking. There's over 700 miles of hiking trails, so lace them up and off you go. The thing you have to remember, though, is that those white blooms that you see there, that's called bear grass. And you're in the wilderness, and where you see bear grass, it's an indication that they named it appropriately. There are bears in the area. You're not in a petting zoo. This is wild area. What I normally do is attach, much to my companions, who's ever hiking with me, chagrin, I'll put some bells dangling from my hiking staff. Bears are not real confrontational. If they know you're coming, they may step off 5 or 10 feet off the trail because they hear you coming and they don't want to be seen. You'll go right by them and not even know they're there. The problem is, if you don't pay attention, like these people coming down the trail, bears aren't stupid. They're not going to go rambling through the trees and the underbrush when you made a nice clean path for them to get from point A to point B. They're going to use the path. So if you're hiking on the path and you're in bear country, you do well to keep your head up, unlike these unsuspecting folks that are in for a big surprise in a minute. The glaciers, when the last ice age, when it retreated, it carved out these magnificent valleys when they were on its way back up to Canada, and left in its wake are these gouged out holes where either the melting glaciers or the spring-fed rivers coming down from precipitation off the mountains have filled up the holes. Not in the state of Montana, just within the borders of Glacier National Park, there are over 250 lakes. They're all over the place, and they're absolutely magnificent. You can go at different times of the year right back to the same place and get dramatically different scenery. This is the largest lake, Lake Mcdonald, which is right along going to the Sun Road. Readily accessible. Obviously, this is a fall picture. They're about our latitude, so they have very similar deciduous forests that change in the fall. They come back in a couple months, and winter's there. You can still get to it, but now the leaves are gone, and you've got ice is returned, and it's blue and white everywhere. So same spot, very different look to the place. To give you an example of what one of the hikes would look like, Lincoln Lake is popular. There are 2 circles there, the Lincoln Lake Trailhead right off of going to the Sun Road, and then there's a dotted line that brings you up to the Lincoln Lake Circle. Well, it's an 8-mile stroll. Stroll is probably the wrong word. Just to the first few dots of that trail, going up to the top of Snyder Ridge, the trail climbs over 2,000 vertical feet within the first 1.5 miles. So it's a very steep start to things. You got to be in pretty good shape to do this hike. But you get out to Lincoln Lake, and here's your postcard pictures that you can take. This is at lake level, that's Lincoln Lake, and coming down from the ridge up above is Beaver Chief Falls. So you can see the falls, but you can't see the source. What is it, a river? What's it drawing from? If you've got the gumption and can keep climbing, you get a hell of a vantage if you go up higher. That's the falls on the left, and you're looking down at Lincoln Lake. But from up here, you get a view of Lake Ellen Wilson. So you get a twofer. It's the lake up above that's the source of the water for Beaver Chief Falls that's flowing into Jackson Lake or Lincoln Lake down below. Mount Jackson on the right there is climbable. You should know your mountaineering stuff. There's a few ridges that are a little tricky, but it's probably the most readily attainable in terms of tourist hiking. There are 6 mountains in Glacier that are over 10,000 feet. That's one of them. So you note the lack of crowds. This is peak visitation. This is in the middle of the summer. That's about as scarce as the snow gets. The water after an August day of hiking, you may be sweating, but when you get up to these lakes, there's ice in them. It's very, very cold water. So when you put your legs in to cool them off, it takes a matter of minutes before your muscles start cramping up because the water's so cold. They're brutal. And where you have the melting snow and stuff, there's no shortage of waterfalls and rivers that are flowing down. It's just tremendous area to hike through. The Valley of the Gods is an afternoon hike, get you up here, and again, you can't take a bad picture. You get up to some of these meadows and it's just glorious. You don't have to hike. You can take, they don't have mules. It's like the mule ride to get down the bottom of the Grand Canyon. You can do horseback rides. They have day trips. You can take multi-day trips out. There are chalets out there. I don't know if you saw it on the map, but right near Lincoln Lake, there's a Sperry Chalet is there. This was one of the more favorite stops on the overnight horseback rides. It's pretty good size. It can host over 150 guests, or used to be able to. You've seen the fires in the west that have been going on. It's a problem. This was a couple summers ago in August of 2017, 3 years ago. The Sprague fire caught up with the Sperry Chalet, and other than the stone walls, there's nothing left of it. But it was so popular that they started a fundraiser. They raised $12 million to rebuild the chalet. Sounds like a lot, but it's not real easy to get building supplies up where it takes you an 8-hour hike to get up into. They did rebuild it. It was ready in the springtime. They were ready to kick off the summer season, and they never opened. The COVID hit and screwed everything up. So I've actually been to 13 national parks this year in 2020. If you don't mind flying, it's kind of a good time to be at visiting parks because the roads are open, the trails are open. If you've been to the park before and you know where you want to go, there aren't a lot of other people there. If it's your first visit, I usually recommend very strongly that everybody go to the visitor center on your first trip. They always have a 25-minute, 30-minute video. They have theaters, and they'll go through a movie that'll show you what there is that's special about this area, why it warrants national park status, and it's a good orientation. Those, unfortunately, most of the visitor centers and all of the theaters have been closed this year, so hopefully that'll come back. It's not the only one. This is Granite Chalet. How'd you like that? That to put your feet up on the porch and have your wine at the end of the day, looking out at sunset on that mountain. There again, no roads and very, very few buildings in the park. So if you do make the effort to hike out to these chalets, that's your reward. You've got this kind of scenery to yourself. But unfortunately, they can reserve now. There are only so many bunks in the place, and like a good concert tour, within minutes of the tickets going on sale, literally every single night of every month of the summer gets sold out. So do your homework in ahead if you're going to try to reserve one of the chalet spots. But that's not the only place to stay. You don't have to camp out. Back in the early days of the parks, when the railroads connected through, they wanted to entice the Easterners, the money bags from the East, to come visit the parks. So they physically built a sawmill within the borders of the park just to build these magnificent lodges. If you have 300-foot Douglas firs in the area, or this is the size of the logs that you have to work with, you can build hotels like this. They don't make them like this anymore, but that's the reception area in, which one are we at here? Glacier Park Lodge. And it's not the only one. Here's Many Glacier Hotel, still, again, built by the railroads. This is just below the other one. This is on the shore of St. Mary's Lake. Look at the interior of this one. When they didn't do Super 8s or Motel 6s back then. They made it a destination so that when you came, you would stay for a week or more. But they're just grandiose. That would be a fun bucket list, actually, to go and stay, because there are lodges like this throughout the Park Service system. There's El Tovar perched on the rim of the Grand Canyon, or the Ahwahnee in Yosemite Valley. I mean, there's just a lot of old lodges like this to go and stay at. There are day trips through some of the rivers. There are concessionaires that are authorized to bring down. It's not anything that's going to make you forget the Colorado going through the Grand Canyon, but if it's a hot summer day, it gives the kids something to do, and they're fun. It's another different activity. And if you do an overnight, you can pull up on a section of the river where there's no one else, and you get sunsets like this to yourself. Going to the Sun Road, the one road through the park. It's where a road doesn't really belong, but back in the Depression era, this was a CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps make work project. The they didn't have pneumatic drills back then. They had steam shovels. You can see the mountain on the right where they have yet to put a road through. Basically, they had to carve into the side of solid rock mountains to put a road in. And this is what resulted. It's a fantastic drive. It's 50 miles long. My very, very strong recommendation is that you drive it. If you're going to drive this road, you have someone else, and they do the sightseeing on one direction, and then you switch and you do the sightseeing on the other, because note the lack of guardrails. This is the road just drops off, and there's tunnels. There's not a lot of extra room on them. You won't pass too many cars, but it's a tricky drive. It's one of the most beautiful scenic drives anywhere in the U.S. You do go over the Continental Divide. This is the best way to see it. Leave your car over at the visitor center and take the red jammer. These are the old buses that they've refurbished, and on a nice day they open the tops up and leave the driving to them. You can be blissfully unaware of the propping up. See the architectural arches that are shoring up, like I say, the road where there doesn't belong to be a road. But this is your views. The wildlife, you're going to get it's not a rarity to see wildlife. The bighorn sheep are curious. If you're hiking the lower elevations, you'll get elk. This is during the mating season, so they're bugling. Bears, you'll see cars. When cars do stop, everybody wants to get their bear picture. This is with a telephoto. This is not up close and personal. again, it's not a petting zoo. They're wild creatures, so keep your distance. But you can see them. Bald eagles nest in the area. It's a fun afternoon to take a good camera. And we have our friend the the mountain goats. There are certain parts of the park where you can go, like this one, where this rock wall, has veins of salt that come. It's like a giant salt lick, basically. God knows how these these hooved creatures get up there, but boy, can they climb. That's just a sheer face, and they get right up there to lick at the salt. There's over 1,500 of the mountain at last count alive and active in the park. This is, you can't miss. This is from the Many Glacier Hotel out off the balcony. That's your sunset over St. Mary's. So we're gonna have to speed it up a little bit because it's already a half hour and we've gone to one of 9 parks. So unfortunately, Yellowstone's not the one where you want to speed up, though. It's in the corner of Wyoming. It's actually the only park that bleeds over into 3 different states. There's some in Montana, some over in Idaho, but obviously the bulk of it is in Wyoming. The white line are the roads. It's essentially a figure 8 to drive around Yellowstone. This was the first of national park to use the term national park. It's pretty good size. Death Valley is actually a little bit larger in the lower 48, but this is over 2 million acres. So this isn't one that you come below. It's actually 3 parks in one. At the bottom of the figure 8 is the thermal area. You see Old Faithful and the Geyser Basin. Very, very different from in the middle, the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. Totally different with waterfalls and rivers and cliffs. And then up in the upper right-hand corner, the northeast corner, the Lamar Valley, you could be over in the Serengeti. That's where all the herds of animals are and stuff. So within one park, you've got 3 very distinct ones. It was the first, and you got to start somewhere. So yeah, there's quite a list of things that they used to do. Everybody that came early on wanted to get their picture, get a picture of a bear. So the rangers obliged, and at 4 o'clock every afternoon, they would put food out, and the bears are pretty fast learners. They would learn that there was going to be food, and they would come around, and everybody was happy. They got their pictures of a bear. Well, they don't do that anymore. The wolves were predators. They were dangerous, so they eradicated all the wolves, hunted them to extinction. They've been reintroduced, and they haven't done that anymore. The Park Service used to pump water from the thermal features to give the lodges running hot water. Well, that threw off the dynamics of the features itself, so drained the geysers and stuff. So they don't do that anymore. Like I say, they had to start somewhere, but they've moved on. And despite over 3 million visitors a year, there's actually more of the park returning to its native state than there was earlier. As roads come into disrepair, some of them are not re-asphalted. They're dug up and returned to the natural state. What you're looking at, the yellow border is the border of the park. The red circle is the single largest supervolcano anywhere on the face of the earth. The entire park sits atop a massive magma chamber, and it's essentially a caldera that's waiting to blow. Here in New England, it would take you 15 miles of drilling to go straight down through the layer of mantle before you would get to liquid magma and lava. In Yellowstone, it's barely 2 miles down. There's magma sitting right below the surface. In geological terms, 2 miles is right below the surface. Using modern technology that they can look down and see what's underneath the different layers of rock now. They've discovered the magma chamber underneath Yellowstone. I'm sure you've seen pictures of the Grand Canyon if you haven't been there yourself. It's a very, very big hole in the ground. There's enough magma sitting under Yellowstone to fill the Grand Canyon 11 times. That's the volume of the magma chamber sitting there. So if Yellowstone happens to blow, we're not going to have anything to worry about because that's a deal breaker. That will be the end of the world as we know it. REM's words. It is a shaky area. There are earthquakes. They don't register on the Richter scale. They're not newsworthy, but there's 2,000 to 3,000 earthquakes every year monitored within the caldera. So it is an active area. I'm going to skip over John Colter. He was one of the original mountain men. He was on the Lewis and Clark expedition, and on the way back, they were heading back to St. Louis, and he said, "The hell with this! I like being out in the woods." So he stayed. And he caught on with a fort, one of the frontier forts, and they sent him out to the woods to make peace with these Indians that were raiding the fort. So he was the first one to get down to Jackson Hole area and see Yellowstone. Came back with these stories of bubbling hot water out of the ground, and they thought he was nuts until they found out that he actually was telling the truth. Thermal features, the first area of the park. There's over 10,000 thermal features in Yellowstone. That's half of all of the geothermal features on Earth are within the confines of Yellowstone. There's 5 major types. We'll go through them quickly. Hot springs, they're beautiful, but that's not mineral colors. That's actually heat-resistant algae that grows blue and green and orange and red and all kinds of different colors. It is a national park. You're allowed to go pretty much anywhere. You would be very, very highly recommended that you stay on the boardwalks in the thermal area. There's no way of telling how thick or how thin, actually, the crust is. And this is literally boiling water. You don't want to thrust your foot through and go into it. So boardwalks are cool. You can see the people to give you some scale of the Grand Prismatic here. There's a lodge, a visitor center out in the background, but then you can go for a hike on the boardwalk and look at the size of this. Is one, it's the largest hot spring anywhere in the US. The second type of feature are these Travertine Terraces. Travertine is a mineral like gypsum actually, and it forms, you'd swear somebody carved these terraces. There's very little that man can improve on that improves on what nature has put in place itself. They're absolutely beautiful. This is over in the Mammoth Hot Springs area. Mud pots are fun if you don't have, if your sense of smell is not sensitive. They just sit there and they bubble up. They're pretty cool, but when that bubble bursts, it's straight sulfur gas. That's what's bubbling up out of the ground. So when it does burst, it's a pretty strong rotten egg smell. And they just sit there bubbling away. It looks like something out of Mordor. Steam vents. Steam vents are where there's a crack in the crust where groundwater or rainwater can work its way down to a hot spot. And then when it hits either lava or hot rocks, it turns into gas. It boils and comes shooting back up the crack and comes out as steam. This is the Black Growler, which is a pretty good size steam vent. These go year round. It's not an eruption. It's just a constant belching of steam. This roaring mountain, the whole side of the mountain is just steam vents all over the place all year round. But there are geysers that are a little different layout. They have a collection basin underneath where the same thing happens. Water from whatever source gets down in there and collects and collects and collects. And then when it reaches a certain pressure point, boom, it blows. There are fewer than 1,000 anywhere in the world. And again, over half of those are here in Yellowstone. So it's, if you're a geyser hunter, this is the place for you. There's Beehive Geyser. Not as reliable as some of the other ones. It goes once in a while. This one actually, Steamboat Geyser, is the largest anywhere in the world. It shoots up almost 400 feet in the air, but you never know when it's going to go. In last year in 2019, 45 eruptions throughout the year. That was up from 32 the previous year. However, before that, for the previous 3 years before that, it never blew up. It never went off. The 60s, they averaged 20 a year, and then it went dormant for 50 years. It never blew up. Then you get one of those earthquakes that shifts, and all of a sudden the chasm, the collection, all of a sudden is closed off from draining, and now it goes off again. But you never know when it's going to go. So you want to see a geyser, you go see Old Faithful, very aptly named Old Faithful. There's legitimately a digital clock in the visitor center over on the right. There's a gift shop and a restaurant and everything. But there's a countdown to when Old Faithful is going to be going on. It's like every 67 minutes or 72 minutes or something. And you'll have company. I was there in the summer, one summer, set my alarm and got up at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning and went out, had the place to myself. It doesn't shut off just because it happens to be nighttime. So I had the very unique experience of being the only one in the audience. I had Old Faithful go off just to myself. And at 8 o'clock, the tour buses are going to pull in and you'll be 20 deep trying to get your picture of it or something. I mean, it's very popular, obviously. This is a unique hike. It takes you about a little over a mile to get out to this section of the river. The river coming downstream is cold, but they've built a berm, stone wall that deflects some of the river water into a side track. The water coming down from the hillside is boiling water. So this is kind of like the Three Bears. You go up as far in the pools until you find your perfect comfort level where the mixture of the hot and the cold water suits you just right. It's kind of a communal bathing area, but there are not a lot of places that have natural hot and cold water, so it's kind of unique. Now we go over to the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. Obviously, this is very, very different look than the flat thermal area. You have the lower falls. That's twice the height of Niagara Falls. It's actually the highest volume waterfall anywhere in the Rockies. This is a little bit further away. This is a point called Artist's Point, which you can imagine how many people have painted this picture. There's a trailhead here that goes, you can hike down to the bottom if you want to turn around and come back up. But it gives you a very different view of the river and the canyon from down below. And it's not the only waterfall. There's almost 300 waterfalls in Yellowstone. And you can make a bucket list just of going to see waterfalls. Yellowstone River, you can go on raft trips. This I mentioned before is the returning the land to less development. The Lamar Valley is where the herds hang out. This is wide open, a lot of grassland, plenty of grazing for bison and elk, and there's actually 7, well, these guys aren't ungulates, that's the river otters, but there's 7 different species. Ungulates are hooved animals. So you have the fastest land creature in North America, the pronghorn here. Bison, elk, sheep, deer, moose, goats. There's all kinds of food. Food if you're a predator. So where there's food source, you also get wolves and coyotes and bears and mountain lions. They get their elk steak. They keep the population in order. The bear wants his bison burger, so he shreds up a carcass. It's a pretty unique area. It's actually the only place in the lower 48 where every species, because we reintroduced the hunted to extinction gray wolves, the wolves are back in the mix now. So now every native large mammal exists in the boundaries of Yellowstone. Very, very different to visit the park in the winter. It stays open all winter. They get over 20 feet of snow. So you have a very different choice of options as to how to get around, but you get very different pictures as well. There's your lower falls. They do have snowmobiles. You can go out, but the bison have the right of way. So if they choose to use your path, you sit on the sidelines and wait for them to clear. And again, the geysers and the hot springs don't shut off just because it happens to be cold out, but you got to take your snowshoes or your cross-country skis to get out to them. Makes for some pretty cool pictures, though. Any time of year. That's the Lamar. So now going down south, out the south entrance of Yellowstone, there's a 27-mile section that connects the Grand Teton National Park to Yellowstone up at the top. Rockefellers, we owe big time for our park system. John Jr., when the Tetons were established and Yellowstone was up north, all of a sudden the connector started cropping up. They didn't exactly have billboards, but there were fences, there were homes being built and stuff. Rockefeller set up a dummy corporation and bought up, unbeknownst to everybody, he bought up all the parcels of land and then turned them over to the Park Service and said, here, now it's protected, it's yours. So in return, the parkway is named after him. Grand Teton, back in the 20s, just below Yellowstone. This was actually the first national park I ever went to. As Jessica mentioned, I got off the bus here and thinking I was 14 years old. I was very proud of myself. I had climbed to the top of Mount Washington, and that's the tallest in New England. Well, to get off and see this is a 7,000 foot from Jackson Hole up to the top of the Grand in one fell sweep. I had never seen anything like that, and my jaw just absolutely dropped. I won't go into the geology too much here, but basically Jackson Hole is a fault system. It dropped, the Teton Range rose up. It used to be a 4-mile differential at 5,000 feet a mile. It was 20,000 feet difference between the valley and the top, but the great equalizer, erosion over the eons, 13 million years, have worn it down so that it's only a 1-mile differential. From the valley up to the Grand is a mile. They're actually fairly young, the youngest of all the American mountains. 7,000 feet straight up from the valley floor. There's your aerial view. That's the road going Jackson Hole. The town of Jackson Hole would be to the left, to the south, and then Yellowstone's to the right, which is north. This is looking west at the opening into the backcountry, which is Cascade Canyon. And you can hike around Jenny Lake. Beautiful, beautiful scenery. But you're in bear country. You're in the wild, so you got to be aware of it. This is driving up Signal Mountain, which is a series of switchbacks, goes back and forth and back and forth. But you can drive right up to this overview, looking right down the Snake River plateau. You don't even have to hike to get to here. You can drive right up to it and get a great overview of the whole valley. This is a day ride out around. If you don't want to hike around Jenny Lake, this was a horseback ride that we went on out to Jenny Lake. That's your view on a no wind day. But you can cheat if you want to get over there to the Cascade Canyon. You can take the boat if you want. It brings you right across the lake or there's a circumnavigation trail that goes around it at lake level. The elk, the largest elk herd on Earth. You don't see a lot of them during the summer. If you go there, they're up in the high meadows doing their grazing and hanging out there. There's over 14,000 elk in the area. When the snow flies, there's Jackson Hole ski area, actually. They come down, and there's been a preserve to give them a place to hang out. The Elk Preserve is right across the street. And it's very different. They're accessible if it's brutal winter. They can go out, the rangers can go out on snowmobiles and bring bales of hay out to them and stuff and help keep them alive. So it's a big help. The male elk shed their antlers in the spring. After mating, they drop their antlers off. So you can imagine what this area looks like come after mating period in the spring. You got to figure at least half of them, maybe 7,000 of them are males. And that's a lot of antlers laying around on the ground. There's one organization that's allowed to go out into the Elk Preserve and collect this is one of four. That's my wife under the one of the arches in Jackson Hole. This is the village green. This is the north arch. There's a east, south, west, and northeast, south, and west arches. There's four of these. There's no shortage of antlers in the area, but I don't know. I can't see a show of hands as to anybody know what the organization is that's allowed to go and collect the elk antlers. It's the Jackson Hole Boy Scout Troop. That's a once a year fundraiser. They go collect all these antlers and they sell them to artists to make the big chandeliers for the $1 million log cabins, log homes that are being built, or artisans that drill holes for a cribbage board, or whatever they want to make them used for. That's their fundraiser. They have a lot of nice gear, that Boy Scout troop. The fall, it's aspen through the valley. They all turn gold. This was actually the view through a friend of mine's. They got married in a meadow. This was looking through the arch that they stood under to take their vows. How's that for backdrop to your wedding photos? Again, an area where you can't take bad pictures. Black Canyon of the Gunnison is in Colorado. It's in the western part of the state. It's right off the interstate. I'm going to go through this one fairly quickly. It's one of the least visited of all the parks. Gunnison, John William Gunnison, that it's named after, was actually from New Hampshire. It's called a canyon. Normally, what we envision as a canyon is broad and wide open and stuff. This is the antithesis of that. It's 1,100 feet from the visiting area here on the south rim across to the north is only 1,100 feet. It's almost 3,000 feet straight down. So it's long and dark. It's the deepest, most spectacular section of the Gunnison River. The river carved this canyon, and it's still actively doing so. So on the left hand is the south rim. You can see the access road brings you to the overlooks. That's the view on the left, straight down to the water. It's called the Black Canyon, not because the rock is actually beautiful. It's gold and gray and brown and stuff. But other than high noon, when the sun is directly overhead, the canyon is so narrow that it's normally almost dark. It's black through most of the day, so it's hence the term Black Canyon. Gold brown. It's very sturdy rock. This shows the rate of descent. It doesn't sound like much, 95 feet per mile, but that's it's more than 10 times the rate of descent of the Colorado going through the Grand Canyon. So there's the river, and it's still at work. It's still digging down. It's quite a hike to get down there. if you possess the skills, you can, if you're a human Spider-Man, you can climb. The rock is solid like the Yosemite granite, where you can hang from a little nubbin, if you possess the ability to. There is a couple of routes that go down from the top. They've limited to 15 now. I have 3 boys. Excuse me, my wife doesn't like me saying I have 3 boys. We have 3 boys, and our 3 boys and I, the 4 of us, were there in July. We got the last 2 permits to go down. It's very, very steep. The rangers throw these 80-foot long chains around the base of trees to get you down, well, to give you something to climb up on to get back up. When you get down to the bottom, the day I went several years ago, there were 3 of us all day long. There were only 3 backcountry passes. The other 2 were fly fishermen, and I never set eyes on them. They were off downstream fishing, so I had the place to myself, which is a fun day. There's 2 of my boys, Brooks and Galen. This was this past July. They got the last 2 passes and decided to go down. It was 105 degrees. So it's kind of a torture track to get down there, but they were darn happy to get into the cold water down at the bottom. But then you got to come back up, and it's not an easy thing. You get to the sections where that's the only way to get back up is to haul yourself. I was right outside the door to my tent, and that was sunset. Beautiful, beautiful area. Rocky Mountain National Park. If you hit Denver and go to the north up through Boulder, you come to Estes Park, which is the gateway to Rocky Mountains. One of the most dramatic scenery changes anywhere on the planet. You know, you drive across Iowa and the cornfields and Nebraska wheat fields, and everything's flat, flat, flat. And then all of a sudden you get to the end of the Great Plains, and shazam, there's a range of 14,000 foot mountains just loom up out of in the background. Pretty dramatic. This was part of the Louisiana Purchase, very similar to Glacier in that there's only one road that goes from east to west. A lot of hiking trails, 300 miles of hiking trails. This is why there's only one road. That's a depiction of what the mountain ranges are like. Long's Peak over on the left there at 14.2 is the tallest in the park. Estes Park is fun. The Stanley Hotel, Fred Stanley invented the Stanley steamer. That would be the car, not the vacuum cleaner, the Stanley steamer. This was he was a proponent of keeping the area pristine, didn't want to see it developed. So he was an early driver of it being set aside as a national park. He built this magnificent hotel, which grew in fame when Stephen King stayed there one winter. It provided the food for thought for his book called The Shining, staying there for winter. Grand old place, still operating. There's Long's Peak, obviously facing east. That's sunrise on the tallest in the park. You know, we have our quaint little 4,000 footers that all the New Englanders, oh yeah, I'm in the 4,000 footer club. You know, I've climbed all of the 4,000 footers, which I don't mean to belittle the effort. That's a fine undertaking. Not in Colorado, just within the confines of Rocky Mountain National Park, there are over 100 11,000 foot mountains, and 60 of those are over 12,000 feet. This is just within the park. So this is, we're not, I think this is where the phrase "we're not in Kansas anymore" came from. They call a park these valleys, these meadows, and that's where you'll see your wildlife. They'll gather during mating season down there. Many curves, there's a parking area there on the road where you can look back down at where you've come. Many parks curve. because there's only one road, if it travels from 8,000 feet from Estes Park up to over 12,000 feet to get up. It goes up over, it's the highest continuously paved highway anywhere in the United States. You go from high prairie at 8,000 feet up to the Arctic. If it snows up above, they shut off and you can't get started because you just have to turn around. If you can't go over the 12,000 foot, and sometimes as early as October, that's already shut off. So if you're driving, you start from the east and it's a deciduous forest and you have lakes and mountains in the background and it's beautiful. But as you drive up and up and up, you get to tree line, the trees shrink, and then you go around a couple corners and all of a sudden it's as though you got transported up into the Arctic. You're up in Alaska. It's tundra. There are a couple of parking areas where you can get out of your car. And again, the elk don't know that they're supposed to be afraid of you. So they just kind of hang out, make for great photo ops. This was a telephoto. I didn't really get that close to them. The mom and the kids hang out and they're grazing, they're having lunch, and they let dad do the posing for the great photos and stuff, but you can get some pretty cool pictures up there. The visitor center is just below 12,000 feet. They actually have those logs are on the roof because the storms and the winds up there are so vicious, they'll rip the roof right off. So they figured a way to hold it on. You hike up this little trail. It's not very far. It's like a quarter of a mile, but it gets you to 12,005 feet, so that you can say that you've been up to 12,000 feet. Then you go down the other side, that you've gone over the Continental Divide, and then everything on the other side. This is the headwaters of the Colorado River. Actually, this is when it's just a baby. You can take a very gradual, a read your Sunday paper kind of raft trip on the Colorado up here. You get to the Western Park, Western Gate, Mount Baldy, and that's where your sunsets are over on the west side. So that's Rocky Mountain National Park. Great Sand Dunes. Over half of our national parks actually got their start as national monuments. I think 32 of the 62 started out as national monuments, and then over the years, either they needed more conservation and needed to expand their boundaries, or for whatever reasons, they got kicked upstairs, they got promoted to national park status. Great Sand Dunes is one of the newer ones. It was just 2004. It's due south from Denver, but you can't go down the interstate, down 25, because you can't get there from the interstate. The Sangre de Cristo mountain, a 14,000 foot mountain range, is between the eastern interstate, and this doesn't look like much from a satellite view. It looks like a sand pit. But what happens is the jet stream coming from the west, as it goes across the high prairies, picks up the grit and sand, and then it hits these 14,000 foot mountains. And in order for the air to get up and over it, it drops what it's carrying, and you get accumulation of sand. A lot of accumulation. Those are not potted plants in the front there. Those are 30 to 40 foot trees. Those are 600 foot sand dunes, which if you've been down at Cape Cod National Seashore or something and climbed the dunes, this is on a whole nother scale. 600 foot sand dunes. Madonna Creek is cool. You can be out in the middle of our country and have a day at the beach. You can leave the kids in the water at the river while you hike out to the dunes. It's a lot of work. The hamstrings get a workout, but your reward is everybody. 95% of the people that go to the park are just there to ride stuff down. You can rent these boards now right at the entrance to the park. When I first went out there, it was back in late 80s. I borrowed a kid's empty refrigerator box and carried it up and got inside to ride down on it. Now, today, you can cut an edge. You bring your own snap-in bindings and stuff. It's pretty fun. You don't have to slide down. You can actually, if solitude's your thing, this is a good place for you. You can hike out. There's 25 square miles of sand dunes. You would want to bring a lot of baggies. Sand blows. It's loose sand. It blows. It gets into everything. Your cell phone, your camera, your clothing, everything. This is going up the top of the Star Dune is the tallest anywhere in the park. It's 750-foot tall sand dune. And you can get a backcountry permit and hike out there and camp if you want to. These are the kind of sunsets that you get because the clouds all bunch together when they're trying to get up and over the Sangre de Cristos, and it takes good clouds to make a good sunset, and they accumulate virtually every evening. So you're pretty much guaranteed to get some high wow factor sunset shots. So if we drop down out of Colorado, we get to Carlsbad Caverns. The northern border of New Mexico is Colorado. If you drop all the way down to the south, you get Carlsbad Caverns down there. It's actually the largest limestone reef anywhere on the planet. The same Guadalupe Mountains National Park is in Texas. It's like 40 miles, 35, 40 miles down the road from Carlsbad. Very different in that the limestone reef that once was the floor of an inland sea, that's where all the limestone built up. This is the natural entrance to get down into it. I was just there in August, actually, and because of COVID, they had shut off the elevator. So the only way to get down into it was to go down this 700, stop me if you've heard this before, 750 foot straight down to get to the bottom through the natural entrance. Normally you can take an elevator down and drop down, and you would think, boy, I don't know, I've got claustrophobia. I do, in fact, get claustrophobia. And the first time I went there, I thought, I don't know, 700 feet down, I don't know how I'll feel. You get out of the elevator down below, and it's anything but claustrophobic. The rangers are over on the left, and your ranger tours line up here, and there's a gift shop, and there's a restaurant, there's neon lights all over the place. The thing is huge. There's a big open chasm. So not to worry if you have any fear of closed spaces. This is quite the opposite. The first room on the tour that you come to is called the big room. The big room covers over 8 acres. I don't know what the zoning is in Chelmsford, but what's it, quarter-acre zoning or half-acre zoning? This one room is 8.2 acres of land. This is one of my favorite all-time pictures. This is a shot. You can see the dead center. You can see the group way up in the back, the little people in this picture. This picture was taken in 1952. I don't know if you're old enough to know the flash bulbs that used to go on the tops of cameras. You had the later models had 4 of them, and every time you took a flash, the flash bulb would go, and then it would pivot to a new side. Well, the original ones only had 1. You had to replace them for each flash. Picture? This guy, Tex Helm, wired together 2,400 flash bulbs to get this picture. So that this was obviously before the cave was, at this point, you were taking tours with lanterns and stuff. There was no electrical lighting. So to get a picture of the cave, he fired off 2,400 number 2 super flash bulbs, lit up 55 million square feet of surface in the big room. It's never been attempted since. I just thought it was kind of a unique picture. I have a poster of it framed. Will Rogers went down there, and in the big room, he said, "This is like the Grand Canyon with a roof on it." That was his take on it. Now they have electrical lights that backlight all the formations and stuff, but you can spend the better part of a day. Every formation, it sets the bar as to what constitutes a cave. If you've gone through Carlsbad, the others take a back seat. Mammoth Cave may be longer, doesn't hold a candle, so to speak. Doesn't hold a candle to Carlsbad. You know exactly what you're going to get. Every 365 days of the year, it's going to be 56 degrees there. Doesn't change. Big. They actually hold weddings down here sometimes. Beautiful, beautiful. You don't have to take that tour. There are different ranger tours. The King's Palace brings you to different areas. The Hall of the White Giant gets you dirty. You got to have knee pads and helmets and stuff. You crawl through passageways, obviously very different. Free climbing and ladders and stuff. There's a lantern tour that's led in an area where there is no electricity or paved anything. So you get to see what early tours of the cave look like. This one didn't tickle my fancy. This is the Spider Cave. They actually have a mock-up up in the visitor center of cinder blocks that you have to, if you're going to sign up for this cave, you have to crawl through the opening of the cinder block formation to prove to them that's the size of the tightest fit on this tour. You don't want to discover while you're down there that you are a little too large for this tour because you'd be stuck. Obviously not for the, you can go on it if you're a beginner, if you want to, if that's your thing. Up above, Carlsbad is not the only one. Within the confines of the borders of the park, which are 73 square miles, there's almost 100 caves that have been found. There's 94 of them. Slaughter Canyon, it has a different entrance to it. You can drive over to that. 5.5-hour tour to go through that. It's very similar to the Lantern Canyon. There's no electricity, there's no paved paths or anything. So it's a lot more strenuous tour if you want to go au naturel. This is an amazing cave, Lechuguilla. Lechuguilla is the deepest cave anywhere in the United States. It's over 1,600 feet down, but this is not for, it's not open to us. You have to, it's like a clean room. You have to be not only in the scientific community, but you have to have very advanced spelunking degrees as well, certified caving to go down there. They don't want it being contaminated because it's so pristine. Up above, this is basically the Chihuahuan Desert, flows up from Mexico. This is the northern section of it. The reason I went in August was because the only previous visits had been in January and February, and I had never seen the bats. The bats are how the cave was initially discovered. The kid that Jim White thought he saw there was a fire. He thought that it was smoke, but when he got closer, he found out that it was a tunnel of bats flying up out of the natural entrance. They winter down in Central America, and they're only up here in the summer, and I hadn't seen them before, so I went there to see this. There's an amphitheater outside the natural entrance where you can sit and watch the bat flight every night, where God knows how many millions and millions of them fly out every night. I didn't see one single bat in August when I was there. They're very sensitive to pressure, and there was apparently a low pressure system coming in. It wasn't raining yet. It was a clear night, but they knew it was gonna, the pressure was changing, and they chose to not go out and hunt that night. So it's not a guaranteed thing that you're going to see the bats, but go in the summer and you'll have a better chance of seeing them. So if you just drive south from there, like I said, it's 35 miles south, the same reef, it's a marine fossil reef, the largest one anywhere on Earth. The yellow section is where the limestone is underground. That's what has been eroded to form the Carlsbad Caverns. but the red section of this reef is where it crops up above the surface. So it's the same limestone, but it's up above. That's the Guadalupe Mountains. They're bordered on three sides by the desert, the Chihuahuan Desert. Guadalupe Peak in the middle is the highest point in Texas. It's barely in Texas. It's just below the New Mexico line. I'm looking at the clock because I think the Patriots are kicking off soon, so I'm trying to speed up and finish up here for everybody. The Chihuahuan Desert is desert. I mean, if you are into cactus, there's lots of cactus around there and stuff. It's sand. That's around the base of the mountain. Very, very distinctive landmark, El Cap. El Capitan is right alongside. If you don't want to go up and over the Rockies to get from east to west, and you're going to go the southern route, this is the interstate that goes around the southern end of El Capitan. Nevada Bar. Nevada Bar is a ranger, used to be up in Colorado National Park, was a park ranger. She's an author who decided to write a series of whodunit mystery novels. And the unique thing is that each of her books take place in a different national park. So they're kind of fun. If you've been to the park and they're easy to get into because the books are easy to get engrossed in because you know what she's talking about. Oh yeah, I was up there and stuff. The first one in the series is Track of the Cat, and that took place here in Guadalupe Mountain National Park. Most of the large mammals have been hunted to extinction. The bison are gone, the wolves, the grizzlies, they're not around. But there are still mammals in the area, deer, javelinas are wild pigs in the area, peccaries. There are some black bears. This was in August. Again, it was 105 degrees above the ground. Carlsbad was a nice day to stay down in the 56 degrees, but the next day I hiked here. So this is sunrise. I got an early start before it started warming up. This is what passes for a trail. You hike and climb and climb. The cactus were in bloom and their fruit. This is the prickly pear cactus, and they make jelly out of this fruit. And it was all over the place. This is going up Guadalupe Peak, which is up higher than it's looking down on El Cap. El Cap looks to be the promontory because it's at the end, but it's actually lower. I wore those yellow socks for a reason because I was hiking alone, and if something happens and you're alone, you want the rangers to know. I figured anybody that had seen those, if the ranger said, "Did you see a guy?" I tell the rangers where I'm going, when I'm going to be back and stuff. And if I'm a couple hours late, they start asking people, "Hey, did you see a guy with yellow socks on?" You're not easy to be forgotten if you have those. This is one of the strangest pictures I've ever taken. On the way up, at one point in the trail, this is a a family reunion of sorts, I guess. They're ladybugs. There's an infestation. I don't know what the attraction was. I haven't researched it. It was just a couple of months ago. I haven't really sought out the answer as to what the devil they were accumulating for. But they were in the tree on one side of the trail and covering the rock on the other. There were just millions, and nowhere else on the entire hike did you see a ladybug at all. Just this one spot. It was very strange. So there's the high point up at 8,700 feet. It's a good 5,000 foot vertical hike to get up there. And that's from down below. So the last one is our newest national park, actually. White Sands was just upgraded a year ago this month. December 2019, it was White Sands National Monument. It got kicked upstairs and it's now a national park. It's maybe a couple hour drive from El Paso up to the White Sands. It sits between the San Andreas Mountains and the Sacramento Mountains, I think, are on the eastern side. The winds come from the west. They drain the gypsum. Gypsum is it's a powdery substance. It erodes easily, and it blows down and collects in the valley between the two mountain ranges. It's very similar to sand, a little odd texture. The water keeps it from blowing totally away. There's water underneath the oasis. The water table's very shallow there, so it holds it in place. The southern end of this one drive, that Dunes Drive that goes up into the park, has vegetation, and the gypsum is stabilized. But as you drive up north into the park, it starts turning into, it looks like snow because it's all white. This is the 8-mile drive up into the heart of the dune field. And they have this giant John Deere grader that comes by every morning because all night the winds have shifted the stuff and it blows over the sand, the road. So to keep it passable, you're driving on the gypsum itself. They clear it. So again, with the threat of another hot day, this is sunrise. I drove out there. I had the place to myself. There wasn't another car in the parking lot. And I headed off on this loop, Alkali Flat, which is a hell of a misnomer because there's not one stretch of it that's flat. You're going up and down these dunes the whole trip, and they're pretty good size. They do give you a warning that there's no shade. You are out in the middle of nowhere. So I left the parking area and headed out. There's no trail because the dunes shift. The winds shift the sand and stuff. So there's my hiking staff. They have these trail markers that sometimes are up high, but depending on where the dune has shifted, they can be almost covered up. So this one had maybe a foot, 2 feet left, and it was going to be covered. I hiked for 4 hours. I never saw another human being. This was right in the middle of, well, less visitation this time, this summer, but never saw another human, never heard a noise made by man. It was the most ethereal, surrealistic hike. There's my compass that I bring with me, so I'm not reliant on electronic devices like a GPS or something. It was the only thing I had with me to show you the scale. There were no other people to take a picture of or anything. I just hiked and hiked and hiked, and this is what you get out into. You, I haven't found too many other parks where you can be that alone. It was a very unique experience. You just follow the markers and you get back to the parking area. Others had come because they wanted to slide down the dunes, just like Great Sand Dunes. They go in the park to kids slide down on it. So I grabbed the hotel I was staying at, gave you free flying saucers if you were going to the park so that you could go fly down. I bought that outfit up in Alaska, actually, when I was hiking on glaciers to reflect the sun, but it worked just as well down here. It's nice protection. If you happen to be a redhead and you don't tan, you burn. If you're going to go out in the dunes for the day. There are other ways to see it because there's warm air. They've got hot air balloon rides and stuff. Again, beautiful, beautiful pictures that you can, there is one campground you can camp out there, and this is out the front of your tent for sunset. Well, I'm sorry I had to scurry to get through everything quickly. My fault for the slowdown at the beginning, but I'm not in a hurry. Anybody that has questions, I never tire of talking of parks, so I'm glad to stay and field questions if there are any. Is Jessica with us, or did she get tired of my my yammering? Oh, there she is.
Wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for doing that. Amazing photos, really amazing. Let's see. Did you have any recommendations for people who are traveling with kids? Which ones work best?
Well, I guess the age would make a difference. If they're in snugglies, that's going to be a limitation. If they can carry their own weight, if they're teens, Yellowstone sets the high watermark as far as a must see, in my opinion, because of the diversity. And some parks, like I say, I spent maybe 6 or 7 hours in White Sands, and there's only one trail in the entire park. I took my time, I saw it, I enjoyed it, but that's all there is.
Yeah.
Yellowstone's not like that. Yellowstone, you could spend a week and never retrace your steps. It's over 2 million acres. So if the kids are old enough where you can hike, get up to Glacier and get out in the wilderness. You're going to see wildlife. You'll see them up in the northeast side of Yellowstone in the Lamar Valley area.
Can you camp in Yellowstone?
Oh, yes. They do have lodges, and there are cities outside the gates with inns and hotels, but the campgrounds, you can reserve them upwards of a year in advance now, and it's really a pain. If you've planned your trip that far in advance and you know a year from now you're going to be there, you can stand a chance of getting a campsite, but they're few and far between. They're hard to come by. They do have wait lists, and people's plans change, so it doesn't hurt to jump on a waiting list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's similar actually from what we've experienced trying to get a campground in Acadia.
Yep, very popular.
It's about a year in advance at least. At least it was in the before the pandemic and everything. Okay, Marie Godla has 2 questions. How much water did you carry when hiking the dunes? And do you have any recommendations for lesser known national monuments nearby?
Water, shame on you if you run out, because you know where you're heading. You know, if you're going in the desert and it happens to be July or August, it's going to be hot. So whatever your maximum weight limit is, it doesn't hurt to come back and you haven't drunk it all. But to be short, the cavalry's not coming when you're out there. I skipped over a story from this summer in the Black Canyon of the Gunnison, just in the interest of time. But my 2 sons went down there, and again, it was 100 degrees. The ranger, before he would give us the backcountry pass, he went on, it was like he was trying to dissuade them from going down there. He went on about how hot it was, how you can't bring enough water, you got to bring extra food because you don't know what's going to happen and you could get stuck down there. And he was like trying to terrify them. Well, damned if they didn't get down there. And my kids had extra, more than they needed for water, and power bars and food and stuff. And they had walkie-talkies. They ended up, I say that because cell phones, there's no signal down in the canyon. We checked in every hour with my other son and I from the top, and they told us, listen, we're going to be a little late. We're trying to help another pair of hikers. Long story short, a guy from New Jersey and his son were down there, had completely underestimated the need for water. They were out of water, they were out of food, they were in heat exhaustion. His son was getting heat stroke. He was falling on his face every second or third step that he was taking. There was no possible way they could get back up on their own. My sons gave them their extra water, they gave them food. Brooks happens to own a CrossFit facility, and he literally physically threw the kid on his shoulders to get up that trail that's so hard to get up by yourself. He ended up carrying the son up because they were not going to make it on their own. They couldn't get back up.
Wow.
You shouldn't get yourself in positions like that, but and they were in trouble. They were damn lucky that my sons happened to have come along, because my two were the last two down there. You have to check in when you come up, and other than the father and son and my two boys, everybody else had already been up and out of the canyon. So if my kids hadn't been around, they were going to be there for quite some time. So I can't overemphasize the need for water.
So that begs the question then, I guess, is there any kind of checkpoint that makes sure that you are prepared to go on these
you don't
hikes?
have to take there are rim trails along the top where if you don't have to be quite so adventurous.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to bite off that challenge, then you got to be up to it. If you've overestimated your abilities, you can get in trouble. Same with that climb I just showed you, the Guadalupe Peak. It was 105 degrees, and there were not a lot of us climbing up there that day. I was coming down by 11 in the morning. I was coming down, and there were people just starting the climb. I just shook my head because they were right in the hottest part of the day, and they were going up in the desert, up 5,000 vertical feet. It was crazy, but to each their own. I mean, that's the thing about national park. You're allowed to, they can't stop you. You can go wherever you want, but geez, use some common sense.
Yeah, you got to do your research. I mean, I've certainly been in that position in the Adirondacks before, where we overestimated our ability to get through a 5-mile hike with big backpacks to camp out in the Adirondacks before, and it just didn't turn out well. So it's really important to check the guidebooks, check all of the park sites, make sure the trails are clear and everything. Yeah.
The rangers are an awesome source of information.
Mm-hmm.
They can, if you tell them where you plan on going, they're pretty familiar with their parks, and they'll let you know if maybe that's not the best idea for today.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other question was, are there monuments? Was that in relation to the parks that we were looking at, or are you saying around here?
It looked like there was the question was monuments around, any monuments, known national monuments nearby hiking the dunes.
In New Mexico, there's they have 2 national parks now, Carlsbad and now White Sands, but there's about 12 or 14 national monuments if you're down that far, just below Great Sand Dunes. New Mexico, there's a lot of ancient Anasazi ruins, Indian national monuments in the northern part of the section, so it's not far from the dunes.
Mm-hmm. That seems to be all the questions we have right now. Give it another second. I want to thank you, Steve, so much for all of your time tonight and for coming online with us and doing this great presentation. I already heard from at least 1 or 2 people that they've already planned trips for the future based on your
They're your parks. You pay for them. You might as well go see them.
Exactly.
And that's what I'm trying to give you an idea as to the variety of things there are to see and do out there in the parks. It's not just a rubber stamp. Oh, ho hum, another national park. They are so unique, and the experiences just last a lifetime.
Yeah, you do such an amazing job with these presentations. And we thank you so much. And everyone else does too. I'm seeing a lot of excellent comments coming through. And yes, I will be putting the January presentation. It will be on the island parks, which will be excellent.
When we're sitting up here shivering in the snow in January, we're gonna choose the segment of my presentations that cover all of the national parks that are on islands.
It's going to make you feel nice
So-
and warm and cozy.
Exactly.
So January 14th at 7 p.m. That's when that will happen. And I will put that on the calendar as soon as I can, first thing tomorrow. So everyone can go and sign up there. Thank you again, Steve. And
right.
we'll see you all next time.
Great. Hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
So long now.
Bye.